Hey, everybody. It's AB Stoddard at the Bulwark. I'm back with my friend and editor at large and co author of Morning Shots, Bill Kristol. I'm terrified. Bill Kristol is calm and optimistic and jolly as always, but we're getting down to it. And it's really hard to be at 3 weeks out from the 2024 election. Bill, I've dreaded this for a really long time. And it's surreal to think that there's so little time left for Harris to be making her final case against Trump, for the country to come together and reject him. I want to start at a positive note, which was, as of last night, she has changed a little bit of her step. And we've been waiting we've conversed here about the threat of Trump and how we thought that was the most important thing in the time left, now that she's introduced herself, to focus on. Not only to mobilize turnout of her own voters, but to try to convince and persuade the holdout voters. She played clips of crazy Trump at her rally. And they have an ad, and they talked about his authoritarian, impulses, but the fact that he's been articulating it of late. You wrote about this yesterday, and you had a long conversation, fascinating, I thought, with Tim about it, as he's leaned in to the strong man in recent weeks even more. He's gained even more in the polls, but she went after that. And it's long overdue. What did you think?
I'm of course, I just am concealing my terror a little better. I don't know if it's better than you. You're good at concealing your terror. Look at you there, laughing and looking poised and all that. And but what we all each conceal and mask our terror and horror in different ways. I mean, I did have lunch just now with we're discussing this Tuesday afternoon with an old friend, a professor, serious guy, very intelligent guy, and we were chatting about all this stuff. And he said, let's just step back for a minute. It is bad. It's really bad. 45, 46, 47, 48%, we don't know the number, 49% of this country is going to vote for Donald Trump after everything, for president
After everything.
again. It's one thing in 2016, businessman, time for a change,
Oh,
Hillary Clinton. 2020, incumbent, hadn't been that terrible maybe. But 2024, after January 6th, after everything that's happened, after the last month or two or three, of where the authoritarianism, which was already evident, intensifies, the America First stuff intensifies, the pro-Putin stuff. Okay, so enough of that. We're just going to stipulate that this is, so we're working in a kind of weird world, right, where we're trying to think about, can she, win a narrow victory? And I hope she does, and I think she's run an admirable race in many ways, but it is kind of insane that we're even having this conversation, if I can say. Now, having said that, we should have this conversation. So I guess on that, I'll just make very quickly 2 points. I mean, it's easy. There are things, she's not a great candidate. She's a good candidate, I think. There are things I would have done differently, I suppose, in terms of the campaign strategy. Having said all that, she started off, I mean, she was thrown into this, it's like being called up for the World Series, which we're talking during the league championships, without having played all season and without having really played in AAA for the last 2 years. I mean, she's been, pretty quiet vice president, and suddenly she's told, okay, go run against Trump, go, give at least one major speech a day, go have a successful convention, go have a successful debate. And you know what? She's done anything ranging from very well in some of those things. I think you and I have agreed at watching the convention and then the debate to pretty well in some of those things. And so I one gets a little critical sometimes, but on the whole, I think it's very impressive. I mean, as a candidate performance for someone who hadn't previously been thought to be a particularly good national candidate, just based on 2019. So that's impressive. The strategy was clearly to build her up, introduce her, and get her favorables up, and get her basic kind of pro-middle, coming from the middle class, working from on a moderate middle class message. That was the core thing they wanted to get out there. I think they did a good job on that. It wasn't inevitable that having started off 3 points behind where Biden was, she would get to 3 points ahead, right? I mean, people could have just looked at her and said, we don't want her. She's Biden's VP. We don't know anything about her. In 2019, she was worse than Biden. So she could go to 5 points down. I mean, we were taking for granted quite a lot of success early on. Having said that, I think that early strategy kind of ran its course. They probably stayed with it an extra week or two. And now they really need to, at the end of the day, get back to why Trump is utterly unacceptable. I just don't think any voters anymore are really looking around. If I knew a little more about the details of Kamala Harris's job creation program, I might change my mind and going from being slightly for Trump to slightly for Harris. It's just implausible to me that there are any actual human beings who are that way. There are some people who are for Trump who aren't saying they're for Trump. There are some people for Harris who are saying they aren't for Harris. The actual people who haven't made up their mind, I don't know what is going to move them, but they had a chance to see Harris and get comfortable with her. Now it's got to be the final gasp of repulsion against Trump.
I can see two scenarios, and that's why this is such a surreal time, because I don't necessarily think he's going to win, but I don't necessarily think she is either. I can see, like you said, a country where between 45 and 49% of voters are going to support Trump no matter what they know about him. I can also see a country where he has lost and his party has lost every election in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and early 24. And that she's going to win a slight majority and that he's going to be turned away. So I can see both scenarios. I think I completely agree with you. She has introduced herself. She has separated herself. She's created space and autonomy from Biden. She showed in that debate when she rope-a-doped Trump that she is much more competent, much more serious about the job, much more, obviously prepared, but that she's tough and that she's not going to go into any situation without being ready, no matter the adversary on a world stage, no matter what. And that she surrounds herself with experts and respects expertise. So people can say, you know what, that debate didn't make any difference. Well, I can tell you that if she didn't, and you've pointed this out, if she did not pass the commander-in-chief test in that debate, she wouldn't be where she is now. And so I can see these two scenarios. Like you, I don't believe anyone else needs more of the introduction to her and needs to know more about her housing plan or anything else. What I do think is left on the table, and you talked about this with Tim, and you wrote about this, I am not so sure, as people are comforted by just our human instinct to believe everything will work out, but also by the elites who are telling them, we're supporting Trump again. I'm business leader Jamie Dimon, or I'm John Cornyn, a former judge and senator in Texas running to be majority leader, and I'm telling you, it's going to be fine. And I think that what's left on the table is for the people who are not politically engaged and don't pay attention to this at the granular level. They thought 2020 was a volatile year. We had the George Floyd protests that did get way out of hand. And then we had this election, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. And then we had January 6th, and they moved on with their life. And they actually don't know that he's not going to be surrounded with normal people who are, again, going to hold up guardrails and, again, going to stop his worst instincts and protect us. I think that is the part that is still not widely enough known. And it's only the politically engaged who really know the depths of that. If you say 40 of 44 cabinet officials or Trump officials are not going to be, supporting him again, we know that, but I don't know how many people in that holdout bucket are aware. So I do think that the showing him at the rally in those clips and Harris saying that's in his voice, listen to his words, he's telling you anyone who doesn't bend to his will is an enemy of this country. I think that is the perfect closing message. She has nothing to lose by scaring the people who believe that if they don't go to the polls, it'll be fine. Or if they vote for him, even though they can't stand him, but butter costs less than, that it'll be fine. And so I'm maybe that's wish casting. I don't know what you think of that. That's what I believe is sort of the last thing that needs to be left on the field, that people are not entirely certain that it won't just be another normal presidency. What do you think?
No, I totally agree. I mean, if there's one thing I could snap my fingers and get everyone in America to see or even to think about and consider, it would be Trump's second term is not going to be like his first term. And that you could be reassured that the first term was because there were people in there who were the guardrails and who kept it from being too crazy, and they'll all be gone. It's a little bit of a complicated argument to make. People believe their own eyes. They believe the 4 years they saw Trump. They weren't so horrified as people like me thought they should have been, but whatever. And so it's hard to tell them, well, actually, that was bad, but it's really going to be crazy and really authoritarian and really a tariff thing that really damaged the economy and God knows what he's going to do with the military and the Justice Department. So I believe all that. Of course, that he's going to do it's going to be terrible, but hard to get people to. That's intrinsically a little bit of a hard sell because he's been president 4 years. I do also think, though, probably people on our side, if I can put it this way, there's a little too much of a kind of, well, it's all, everyone knows everything about Trump. That's all baked into the cake. It's all discount, I've heard so many metaphors. It's priced, the stock is priced in the stock, however you say that. I'm not so sure that's true that they actually know all this stuff, They know a little, but I think maybe it would have been better all along if outside groups in particular, we tried, obviously, Republican voters against Trump, but many, many more groups could have done much more to highlight what you just said. I mean, why can't Mike Pence support Trump? Well, this thing happened on January 6th. I mean, let's just talk about that. That's pretty striking. A vice president not supporting the guy he worked for 4 years and supported, of course, in 2016 and 2020. And let's explain quickly why that's the case. And so I think there's probably too quick a skipping over that in terms of what happened. But I like the closing message. Basically, you then have to decide what aspects of Trump's authoritarianism, quasi-fascism, craziness, weirdness, kookiness, whatever version, erraticness, all that stuff, what particular angles you want to emphasize, what would voters care the most about. Some of it they might just see stuff they dismiss. So that's sort of a tactical question, but I very much agree on the close. I would say that, she can say it at a rally. That's nice. People like us are interested in that. I would like to know what's happening on the paid TV side. I think I think she has run personally a better campaign than Trump. She certainly won the debate and she had a better convention. I think the Trump campaign, I'm open to the view that the Harris campaign is better than Trump in terms of organization, field efforts, turnout the vote. I hope it is, and I think it probably will. I think the Trump advertising campaign has been better than Harris's, is my sense. Now, this is, we don't see all the ads, and I'm not, you'd have to really have experts and focus groups and really test all this. But I think they've just pummeled, maybe they have an easier job also. They've just pummeled Harris, though, on immigration especially, and on crime, now transgender, the kind of classic culture war stuff that they think they can exploit and that they are exploiting. Harris had a very tough choice about the campaign. Did they fight back, or did they get dragged into the mud fighting about, women's sports and transgender, individuals? So they want to stay out of that, but then they have to introduce her and say that she's pro-middle class, but then it looks like they're not answering. So I think it's been tricky. I don't mean to minimize that it was easy to do, but I just think objectively, if I can put it that way, I think if we didn't have paid advertising, I think Harris would be ahead by a little more.
Yeah.
And I think the paid advertising, very focused, very negative, has dragged her down some of these key states. I don't think it's really dragged Trump up, but it's made her more unacceptable, which allows people to then say, well, you know what, he's a kind of a jerk, but he's probably a safer person to default to. So that worries me because I don't feel like I have a good feel for how that paid advertising is going. So it's just hard to track, honestly, unless you sort of, you can actually, but it's just a bit of a pain, so I haven't done as much as I probably should have. So if she closes strong on paid and earned media on disqualifying Trump and really bring home to people how dangerous he is. I think she's had a couple of good adjectives, didn't she, yesterday? What did she say? She said he was reckless,
unhinged, and increasingly, I think, unstable.
Unhinged, unstable is good because it kind of captures a lot of things. It captures the personal side, but it captures the issues, the policies too. And I think the unhinged, unstable, unreliable, you can't believe what he's saying. I mean, I think that's a pretty good closing message if it has some good examples embedded in it.
So I have not seen the ads that are played during football games that are targeting African-American men about her support for transgender surgeries in prison. But I think it doesn't matter how few people it affects. If you shave off some of those voters in key cities, in swing states, that's a huge problem for her. Harris is for they, them, and Trump is for us. That's bad.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting when you talk about whether or not everyone knows everything about Trump. I poked around with pollsters and they haven't systematically checked it. So I don't really have no handle on what it is in year 9 that people don't know about Trump, which is a little tough to swallow right before this, what could be our last free and fair election. But doesn't it make it more of a travesty, right? That we can't get this out there. The people that need to are Milley and Kelly and McMaster and people who worked in the inner circle with Trump and saw him betray our country and, give away classified information to the Russian foreign minister in the Oval Office, and people who know what a fascist he is, and they know what a danger he is and a sociopath. So it's really hard for this to break through with those holdouts who don't follow politics and don't understand that the second Trump term would be so much more dangerous than the first. And it is those voices that are required to get that across. So that's really, it's just a travesty as we look at the time we have left that they haven't stepped up to do that. And I think they'll regret it if he wins. In terms of her finishing up strong in earned paid media, she is going to now do this Fox interview with Bret Baier on Wednesday night, and she is going to, which is a risk. I don't know that it's a reward, but it's a risk. And then she's going to potentially talk to Joe Rogan. So I think we have said all along she should go wherever she can go, and she should reach people who aren't tuning into those rallies. But I wonder, with this time left, Bill, who she's going to persuade on Fox News, if she does get flustered and doesn't have a lot of good answers, to what will be tough questions. There are a lot of tough questions for Harris. She didn't go through a primary. She's going to have to talk about Biden's cognitive condition. She's going to have to talk about immigration, Israel, all these things that have been tough in other interviews, but Bret Baier will make it much tougher. So what are your feelings about her kind of deciding with 22 days left, now it's 21, that they needed to go into the danger zone? What do you think?
I think in a very, very close race, probably have to. Partly you can get to some voters. Partly it sort of leads to a broader narrative that you're tough, you're not scared. Trump clearly is just talking to friendly audiences. I think it's more about doing it than what happens in the. It's more about doing the interview than about what happens in the interview. As long as nothing disastrous happens in the interview, she needs to go in. And for me, people think too much about sometimes it's Bret Baier here and Joe Rogan there, and some other show there. It's still ultimately more about the message, I think, than the interviewer. And if you go in determined to say 2 or 3 or 4 things, Bret Baier can be as tough an interviewer as she wants. He's not going to literally cut you off every 8 seconds. So you can say some things, and you can say, that's a good question, Bret. But just before that, I just want to remind you of one thing. Donald Trump appointed the 3 Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. And there are an awful lot of people viewing Fox News who love my friend Bret Baier over here. You don't think it's great what's now happening in Texas and in other states. And you don't think it's great. I would just do that pretty unembarrassedly. And Brad, let me come back. Now I'll come back to your question and then give whatever answer to whatever question he has about whether Biden was impaired or something. And you just need to be kind of ruthless in doing that and let the media critics cluck a little bit about how you didn't, you sort of didn't answer all the questions quite the way they wanted you to, and you gave your little stump speeches. But she has to have 2 or 3 points she wants to make at this stage of the campaign in every interview, in my opinion. One of them could be that Trump is unstable and unhinged and unreliable and can't be made president again. And maybe she should cite, suddenly on Fox, what she really needs to come in with, now just thinking about this, I'm sure they've thought about this, is the quotations from Mike Pence and John Bolton and the people whom people on Fox have seen a lot. I mean, literally, John Bolton was on Fox for 15 years between being at Bush in the Bush administration and the Trump administration. And she just needs to say, John Bolton, who many of you have seen on this fine network, says this man cannot be allowed into the Oval Office. That's what he says. That's not me. That's John Bolton. And then say the same thing about Pence and say the same thing about three or four other people. Maybe that's one thing to come into your interview with, like in your head. I think Dobbs she's got to close out Dobbs. I mean, you've made this point several times. The Democrats haven't really lost an election since Dobbs. And in 22, 23, when they've won every abortion referendum, including in red states. I just think that issue has to be front and center, that Trump did it, and they'll go further in this direction if Trump gets another 4 years of judicial appointments. And I think she should just assert that they're going to get rid of contraception. I mean, let the defenders of the Roberts Court explain, well, no, Thomas isn't really speaking for the whole court. And this judge in Texas isn't quite, he's a little radical, but he's not quite where most of Trump's appointees are. She needs to just put that front and center. And then, so I think if she comes in with some things like that to say, and then she gets credit for going to the Lion's Den, I guess I think it's the right thing to do.
So I wish you could prep her for these interviews. I mean, I remember you suggesting a few weeks ago that the court's new term was opening, and that would be an occasion for her in the campaign. And Governor Walsh should remind everybody and about the Dobbs decision to talk about the elimination of Roe v. Wade. And I think you make a good point. I don't feel that they've really been talking about that much recently. It's extremely energizing, particularly with young women who maybe have never voted before and think that all of politics is a complete mess, that they feel completely detached from it, that they don't know if they'll ever vote in their life, and they're 19 or 20. And but that's an important issue, a galvanizing issue. And she could have easily been leaning into that they'll come for gay marriage and birth control next on this court. And then that Trump could get more seats on the court. And they seem to have left that quiet. So that's haunting me a bit. So she's doing these pods and interviews, Bill, because she's bleeding with Latino and Black men, and she feels that she needs to do something to reach them. Is time spent in these last 20 days, is it fruitful to try to get them back? I mean, I wrote today that I don't think that they're gettable. I mean, I think you're a man who opposes Trump. You're either going to stay home or you're going to vote for Harris. And the way to get him is to scare him about Trump and the threat of his term. I don't know that there's any amount of hunting or football that you can throw at these men to get them to vote. And I think women are a little more organized. They vote in higher numbers. I mean, they always have, but they will, I think, in this election too. I don't trust the young men who are new Trumpkins to get their acts together to vote in very, very significant numbers, but it is a problem for her. How should she spend these last days, right? Who does she speak to, and where do you get the most bang for your buck?
I mean, the advantage of having $1 billion and, is you can do some of everything. And I guess, of course, every campaign does that. And she needs to do that. A percentage point, whether it's cast by, whether it's a certain number of young Black males or a certain number of elderly white females, it's at some point, it's math in a sense. So I think she can do all of it. In terms of maybe, I think I have no problem with doing a little bit of it now in terms of trying to get some of those young men back, and especially Black and Hispanic men, Black and Hispanic women too. She could improve numbers a little bit, but I think that's sort of maybe a couple more days of that. But she needs to close, with her base. I mean, she needs a massive turnout of college-educated women and of young voters in general, but especially young women. And I think that's why. And I think that if you talk to them, they'll say, well, we're going to close on Dobbs. But I sort of think they're a little too clever by half. Like, if you want to close on Dobbs, just let's get to it now. You can repeat it for 3 weeks. You don't have to just save it for the last day.
We're in the close.
So, So I guess I'm slightly kind of where you are. And you need to now really get the voters who are easiest to get. And you can, and the other thing is the numbers on this. There are a lot of white women in America, and there are a lot fewer, if I can be just simple-minded about this. The young Black man the Black vote's going to be 12% of the vote. She's going to win it overwhelmingly, incidentally. She's going to win Black males overwhelmingly. She's going to win young Black men. So in fact, getting them to vote is fine. There's a little bit too much cleverness. I think maybe you and I discussed this once. Maybe that was not on camera, but the people, the journalists who sort of, she's having erosion among the young Black men. That's true enough if you're comparing it to 2020, and it can make a difference. At the end of the day, the more Black men who vote, the better. Because they're going to vote 2-1. They're going to vote 2-1 for Harris, at least. They may not vote 6-1, which is what she would like. But if you can turn out 3 voters and 2 of them are for you, that's good, not bad, right? So,
Right.
So I have no problem with that focus. But I've got to think the easiest vote to just maximize at this point is women, basically. And she's ahead with women, much more with Black women than white women, but younger white women, okay. College-educated white women, good. And I think those two groups, I would just really make sure there shouldn't be a single student, certainly not a single female student at the University of Michigan or the University of Penn State or the University of Wisconsin who doesn't vote on November 5th.
Yeah. And I want to end on an uplifting note, which is in the column I wrote today. There is a fascinating modeling exercise that the Brookings Institution did, where they found that if current vote preference, because Harris's candidacy has very much excited and energized women voters, the same study looking back to June and then checking in again with October, and it went up in remarkable fashion that once she was the candidate, not Biden, women were very charged up. Abortion became the most important factor in their choice. And she has really good hold with white college-educated women. As Bill said, she's made gains also with white non-college women, which I think is critical. They're leaving Trump a little, and she needs to turn out every college graduate, every woman who has a college degree of any race. But I think that what's very interesting about this exercise they did was that they found that if current vote preference tracks with 2020 turnout of females in the following swing states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Nevada, she will win them. So I thought that was a good note to end on. Finally, some good, real numbers. Yeah. We will be back next Wednesday, far more sick to my stomach than I am today. It's great to be with Bill. Everyone has to keep coming back to the Bulwark's YouTube channel. We are bombarding you guys with stuff here, but it's all super interesting and very important in the last minute scramble to Election Day. Thanks again, and we will see you next time.